Voltron, also known as Voltron Nevera, is the brand new for 2024 high thrill coaster to open up at Europa Park in Reuss, Germany. It's the anchor of the new Croatia section of the park, and in my opinion is the best attraction they've ever done. Which is saying a lot because Europa Park is widely considered to be one of the best theme parks in the entire world. They already boast a huge roller coaster portfolio. But the big gap in their lineup that they are missing was ejector airtime. And so the team at Europa Park, the Mack family, who also run Mack Rides, came together to design one of the best roller coasters in Europe and probably the entire world. I had the opportunity to experience it for my first time just a few months after it opened, and it delivered in just about every way. So in this review, I'm going to dive into the ride experience, talk about the logistics, the thematics, walk through the different elements, discuss everything that you can expect with this excellent roller coaster. So first off, I want to step back to my first visit to Europa Park in 2018. I remember walking around the park, really enjoying myself, but thinking that, they're missing their headliner attraction. They have a lot of good rides like Blue Fire, Silver Star, and Woden, but none of them blew me away like some of the other high-thrill coasters in Europe. And clearly the owners were thinking the same thing because around 2019-2020, they started seriously looking at an extreme new roller coaster for Europa Park, which is a big deal because Europa Park has a worldwide reputation. When they do something, everyone is watching to see how it will go. There are very high expectations. And the main requirements, the things they were looking for, was a high thrill ride, something that was a long experience, high capacity, at least 1,500 people per hour, and they wanted some sort of backwards section. And so, the attraction development team at Mack Rides came out with the first ever Stryker coaster, which is a step up from their original Big Dipper model that can be found at parks like Walibi Holland, Lost Gravity. So instead of the original 2 rows, this is now 4 rows of riders, so 16 people per train. It has upgraded restraints that uses the same technology as the extreme spinning coasters, where essentially they check themselves, which puts ease on the ride operators, and they're very comfortable for the passengers. And they also developed a conveyor belt loading station so they can have 36-second dispatches. The vehicles never stop moving. At Voltron, they typically run 7 trains at a time, with usually 3 navigating the course. The others will be in the load-unload area. So in that regard, walking around Voltron reminded me of the Smiler at Alton Towers, or Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure at Islands of Adventure. There's always movement on the track, and it's like mesmerizing, which is also a big win for guests who don't want to ride and are just enjoying watching it. When you enter the Croatia section, you can walk all around the roller coaster. There are so many interesting and creative views. They really developed this as a full package experience, and it's all centered around a Nikola Tesla story. He was born in what is now considered to be modern-day Croatia, so that's the tie-in with this specific area, even though for all intents and purposes, he's actually Serbian. So it was a bit of a stretch, but most people don't really care, so I was just fine with it. This section of the park is just beautiful. The story of Voltron takes place in 1881. It follows a fictional invention of Nikola Tesla's, with his goal to transport passengers from one place to another via electricity. So when you walk into the Q House, you're stepping foot into a hydroelectric plant where this experiment is taking place. That's why you see this huge Tesla tower at one end, and then there's another down at the turnaround. And I'm just going to say, it is so cool that they actually built 2 Tesla towers, because you only see the second one when you are riding the roller coaster. It's in what is considered a backstage area, and the attention of detail is just incredible. There's a real Tesla tower built in New York City, and these are meant to look identical. And then when you're actually in the queue, there's so much to look at. There's an entire chalkboard full of equations. You can see all these different symbols, including the symbol that is actually the logo for the attraction. If you're unfamiliar, that's the symbol for ohms. It's what is used to measure electrical resistance. And so when you step into this indoor space, you'll see this huge machine plug into the wall, which is part of the beginning dark ride section of Voltron, where the train is physically bouncing up and down while riders are getting electrified. There are these flaps that will open and close, so sometimes you'll be able to see what is going on, other times it is hidden from view. And after the train launches away where it's out of view, you can then look over to the other wall where you see a train of Voltron passengers rematerializing in front of you, meaning Tesla's experiment worked. They teleported from one area to another. And perhaps the coolest thing about it is what will be taking place over your head. There is real electricity coming down from the ceiling that is tuned in a certain way to play the Voltron theme. I don't understand how that works. This is just crazy to me. It plays periodically, so you might catch it while you're waiting in line. It really depends on how long you're in there for. And it is loud, but it is cool. It's like a show. Everyone claps when it's done. I've never seen anything like that before. The fact that they're using real electricity, like if you were to touch that, you would probably die. Of course, there are safety measures in place to make sure that never happens. There's a sensor actually located above the main queue, so if anything were to pass between the queue and the electricity, it would automatically shut off. So very, very smart planning. They've clearly done their research. I was just blown away by the space. The second you pass underneath that Voltron sign, you are completely immersed. Whether it's the water tunnel and the outside queue, the animatronic right before you head to the lockers, they thought of everything. So what you're going to do from here is put your loose items away. These are double-sided, so you'll pick them up after the ride. You're not supposed to have anything in your pockets, not even glasses. Even though there aren't metal detectors, they are checking to make sure that you don't have anything on you. You'll walk up these steps into the station. The line is continuously moving, and there is no way to pick your row. It is complete luck of the draw. Throughout the multiple rides I was able to get on it, I did experience each row. My personal favorites were front far left or back far left. I think if I had to pick the best one, I would say front left. I love how Voltron rides up front, the way it takes each of the elements. The only thing I would really prefer in the back, I think, is that backward spike in the drop off the mid-course. But this ride is so good, you're going to want to do it more than once. So as you board the train, you'll notice that the end seats are hanging out over the sides. You are also elevated just slightly over the inner seats. It's a very smooth and efficient loading process. Cross your arms, the lap bars come down automatically. You have a second to prepare yourself for what is about to happen, and then you dispatch. You're all clear, taking a left-hand turn, passing an animatronic of Nikola Tesla, and parking in this dark ride section. And this is where we have an effect that I have never seen done before. Electricity is pulsing over your head. You lift up and bounce up and down while also vibrating, so it's like you're getting shocked. I had at least seen a bounce track done once over at Phantasialand on Winjas. Not quite to this level, but the vibration aspect, I have no clue how they pulled that off. But it was so cool. So you lock back in place, and then suddenly you have a kick into your first launch. And from a technical aspect, I just find this first launch super, super cool. So it's angled at 105 degrees. So that makes it beyond vertical. To my knowledge, I think it's the only beyond vertical launch ever done. Interestingly enough, a completely straight vertical launch would actually be more forceful because you're angled up more towards the sky. The launches were provided by Intrasys. They do a lot of work for other companies within the amusement industry, and you can see that there are 4 stators or fins across, which is very unusual. From my understanding, this is because they use 2 at a time. So 2 of those stators will propel the train forwards, and then after it's done, they'll switch to the other 2 for the next train. Which, when you're sending a new train every 36 seconds, it's a very smart design. That way you can let them cool. And I'd done a lot of other Mack Rides launch coasters, and for the most part, their launches are known for being on the tamer side. Like, there's not a ton of kick to them, and that is not the case with Voltron. Keep your head back against the seat, because if it is forward at all, you'll probably slam it as you start moving forward. I was definitely surprised. The launches on other Mack looping coasters are usually the weakest part, in my opinion, and I have absolutely no problem with any of the launches on Voltron. So this Beyond Vertical launch sends you into your first of many inversions. This is an inverted top hat. You have a brief moment of hang time as you drop down out of it and then roll over into a corkscrew. So these 2 elements are located directly on top of that massive hydroelectric plant building in the Croatia area. And you'll find several roll maneuvers on Voltron, but I feel like this corkscrew is a great introduction to it because it has a good amount of whip to it. And that's something that you'll want to get used to. As you drop down off of this building, there's an ejector speed hill and then 2 back-to-back immolments. Each one rotates you a different direction. Technically, the second one doesn't actually send you upside down. You roll out of it. So Voltron is formally listed as having 7 inversions, but in a way, it really feels like 8. And as you're dropping down out of this non-inverting immolment, you hit your booster launch. And I would say everything up until this point has been really good, but this is where the layout really kicks into high gear. This booster sends you into a 0G stall. You're dangling there for over 2 full seconds. It is quality hang time, absolutely one of the standout moments on the ride, but the element that follows it is even better. This airtime hill has the single strongest moment of negative Gs the entire experience. You get flung up out of your seat. It was wild. You dive under a section of track and rotate into this high-speed twist. There's a ton of whip as you're flipping from one direction to another. And then you pass on top of the maintenance building and flip into a dive loop. A little bunny hop into the brake run. You have just completed part 1 of Voltron. If you didn't know any better, I could see how you could think that the ride was done, because it still feels pretty complete up until this point. And you're only halfway there. Voltron has 4,544 feet of track. And that is just so impressive considering that its max height is only 107 feet. Both Blue Fire and Woden are taller than Voltron. And yet all 3 of them have the exact same max speed, 62 miles per hour. Weird, right? And for the most part, Voltron has a pretty narrow layout. They had a lot of space to work with, but they were also constricted on size. They had several roads to work around as well as a small river that they couldn't build over for environmental reasons. So you're now at the furthest point of the ride, and this is where things get interesting. The brakes that you just so suddenly hit are right before a turntable. This is the very creative and unique way that Voltron is going to send you out on your return trip. It's a way of breaking up the layout so people don't get too exhausted because Voltron is a lot, so now people can catch their breath. It's also logistically a way of putting trains to sleep at night. This is the maintenance bay directly next door. It's nowhere near the station, which is pretty different than most roller coasters. And so the turntable also doubles as a practical way of transferring trains off. So this can rotate you in any direction. From what I understand, it alternates whether it'll send you forwards or backwards around the turntable. They've done a pretty good job of enclosing this to kind of hide from the fact that this is in a backstage area. I don't like that you can see the road and the office buildings, but I feel like they've done just about all they can to hide it. And I also appreciate that they keep up with the thematics during this, so you have electricity pulsing directly above your head as well as off to the sides. There's smoke effects. You line up with this new section of track, and if you didn't know any better, you probably think you're going to launch forwards, but instead you kick backwards. And I will say, if you're sitting in the front, this section feels a little unnecessary. You barely go up it at all. It's absolutely better in the back because you actually go up at this beyond vertical angle, but I still wish that this section was a little longer. It's a neat function, but in a lot of ways, it reminds me of the backwards part of Full Throttle at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and I had a similar feeling there that I just don't know about this backwards part. It doesn't do a whole lot for me, but again, I appreciate that at least when it starts launching, it does feel pretty sudden. It's not the gradual buildup that you get with some other mock launch coasters. But as you roll forward, you'll accelerate off into a top hat. So this is, of course, halfway through the ride, and this has a twisted drop. You'll rotate to your left-hand side into another ejector airtime hill. Really, really good air. Not as good as the one from earlier, but still a fantastic moment. And this sends you into a wave turn. This is really whippy. It throws you to the left-hand side. So you're getting ejected at an angle. You'll level out and then step up into the only traditional block break on the entire ride. They got really creative with hiding block sections on the ride. That includes the bounce track at the beginning, the booster launch before the stall, and the turntable. So this is the only typical moment of slowdown, but you don't really slow down. And I would definitely not consider it a dead spot because the step up into it is so good. You get crazy airtime there, and then the drop off the mid-course is also nuts. And it like plays a little trick on your brain because you think that the drop off the mid-course is going to be bigger than it actually is. And so it's just this little sudden dip, and you don't even have time to process it before you get flipped into another roll. This is another corkscrew, and Voltron just goes non-stop here at the end. Following this corkscrew is this really tight downward bank turn, and it is so intense. I grayed out, and I did not expect that. Usually you hit your most intense moments towards the beginning of the ride, but Voltron gets wilder as you progress, and that is just so impressive. This thing is nonstop. You're flying so low to the ground, over water, under an arch. You flip to the other side into a bank turn, roll into one final inversion, and then there's one more powerful airtime hill into the brake run. Your total runtime is about 252 seconds. And that is impressive. This thing has less track than Silver Star, is half the height, and yet is a way longer ride experience and has way more elements. There's like 20 or so different moments to Voltron, and that is just crazy. The more I rode this thing, the more it grew on me. This is not just a basic multi-looper. It is designed to feel like a standout ride, and it absolutely is. Now, if there is a downside to Voltron, it does not run like a brand new roller coaster. In theory, a new roller coaster should feel glass smooth and Voltron feels like a ride that's been running for a couple years. Not that it is rough. I've heard from some people who have experienced it that they did think it was rough. I thought it was very tolerable, but it seems like they might still have some kinks to work out with the trains. I mean, these are prototype trains. From my understanding, some run smoother than others, which is another incentive to ride this multiple times because the previous train might not have been as smooth as your next. But I've experienced a lot of rough roller coasters in my time, and this really didn't bother me. But per usual with other roller coasters that have 4 cross seating, you might notice a difference between the inside seats and the outside seats, where the inside could be a little more comfortable, but it just depends on your preference. In general, I've been very impressed with how the team at Europa Park have handled any technical difficulties that have come up with Voltron. It feels like they always handle them right away, which there's clearly a lot of moving parts with this thing, and the final product has just been so impressive. I knew it would be good going in, but I didn't expect to like it as much as I do now. So for Voltron Nevera's final score, I am giving it a 9.5 out of 10. Almost perfect. And this ride genuinely deserves a very high score. Hats off to the people at Europa Park and Mack Rides. They killed it. It's easily one of the best roller coasters Mack has ever built. I think I still like Ride to Happiness more, but this is right up there as one of the best roller coasters in Europe and one of the best that I personally have experienced. Europa Park got their crown jewel attraction, and you should 100% go out and try and experience it if you have the opportunity to. It will be worth the wait. So let me know down in the comments below if you've experienced Voltron at Europa Park, if you agree with the points that I brought up. If you think there's anything I missed, be sure to let me know. And stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.